We're not good. We're not good. Fuck it. We're going for it raw. No crit. Here we go. Oh, it's still crit, yo. How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to another First Descendant video. Now, I know I've been MIA for a while. It's because I did take a little trip. Now, I'm going to put timestamps in the video. If you want to skip past this first part, I'm going to talk about the poll and the reason why I'm not doing a build guide on Jayber yet. So if you just want to skip straight to the Blair build, there will be timestamps. You can go ahead and skip ahead. The reason I opted to go for Blair instead of Jayber is because there's a little bit of a bug going around with him right now. I won't go into depth with it because it's too much to get into, but until it's fixed, I don't really want to build a Jayber. And I asked the community in a poll if they wanted me to build Jayber with the bug being out, and they voted for no. So that's why we ended up going with Blair. And Blair actually turned out to be a really fun Descendant to build. So I'm excited to show you guys what he's capable of, and this is just going to be the early game beginner guide. So his potential is much higher when you invest a lot more into him, into the later game. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. And the first thing we're going to take a look at here is his abilities. We're going to start with Blair's passive, because Blair's passive ties into the entire gameplay loop for him. So we're going to start there. So looking at Blair's passive, we can see it's called Pitmaster. When attacking enemies inflicted with burn, increases skill critical hit damage. Increases skill critical hit rate based on the number of flame zones created on the battlefield. Now this can be a little confusing. When I first read it, I was a little confused about how it ties into the abilities, but we're going to go over everything in depth. That way you guys can fully understand it. It took me a minute to understand myself. I know it can be a little confusing sometimes. So with that being said, we're going to jump over to his first ability and we'll bounce back to the passive to explain how the abilities tie into the passive. So Blair's first ability is called Blaze Up. Blaze Up spews fire and creates a flame zone on the ground. Enemies standing in the flame zone receive continuous damage and are inflicted with burn. Now this is not a ranged ability, he throws it directly under him, so if you do want to apply it to the enemies or burn the enemies with it, you do have to be very close to them. I mean, depending on your range, but for this build you would have to be pretty close to apply the burn. Luckily the burn isn't too big of a deal, so it doesn't really matter if you burn the enemies or not. But when you look at Blaze Up, you have 3 stacks, so you have 3 uses of Blaze Up, which means you can put 3 flame zones on the ground. Now if we jump back to Blair's passive really quickly, you see here where it says skill critical hit rate increase, flame zone count. For 1, you get a 5% skill critical hit rate increase, for 2 you get a 9%, and for 3 or more, but it only goes up to 3, you get a 14% increase. You cannot move past 3 flame zones, so if you have more than 3 flame zones out, without the Descendant mod, you'll only get a 14% skill critical hit increase at maximum. The cooldown that I have is 8.2 seconds for the stack with this build. The MP cost is 28.8. Now flame zones do have a burn damage, as I said, so the burn damage is going to be skill power times 31.6% modifier. This build is not based around burning your enemies with your flame zones. The flame zones are used to give us buffs, and I will elaborate on that a little bit further. But for the general information of the flame zones, they tick at a damage interval of 1 second, so you get the damage that you have every second. The duration is 12 seconds and the range is 3.5 meters. The max expandable range on this is 200%, meaning if you wanted to mod for range, you could only get a 7 meter radius at maximum. And the burn ticks from the flame zones are going to be skill power times 8.2%, so a very low amount of damage, and it ticks every 1 second for a duration of 5 seconds, which means you get 5 ticks of whatever damage you have with your skill power times your skill power modifier. Moving on to Blair's second ability is called Extinguish. Extinguish is a mechanic in recovering your MP and giving yourself the aggressive flavor or taste of aggression buff. So the skill description states, retrieves the flame zones created on the battlefield and recovers MP in proportion to the amount retrieved. On retrieval, gains taste of aggression. Flame zones summoned earlier are retrieved first. The basic info is you have a 15-second cooldown on Extinguish. You get aggressive flavor. Now aggressive flavor gives you MP recovery per flame zone. So if you have 1 flame zone, you get 19. If you have 2 flame zones, you get 38, and if you have 3 flame zones, you get 57. Extinguish is only really used to give yourself MP recovery and help you manage your MP, because Blair does have an issue with MP usage. Now you do get a 23% skill power modifier increase, but this modifier increase is very negligible because of the amount of skill power modifier we have with this Descendant mod on his 4, which we'll get to here shortly. And this build is mainly focused on building into his 4 with his Descendant mod, so the skill power modifier increase isn't as important, and you'll really only use Extinguish to help maintain your MP. So a quick summary of how the ability works. The flame zones you have on the ground, when you use Extinguish, you pull them back. You can get a max stack of 3 when it comes to aggressive flavors, so you can only get the 57 MP recovery, you cannot get more. And the skill power modifier increase is only 23% stagnant, it does not increase per flame zone. And as I said, you can only pull back 3 flame zones. If you have 5, you cannot pull back 5. Now moving on to Blair's third ability, this is going to be Burn Taste. Burn Taste is a flamethrower that you shoot from your hand. Fires a flame forward, enemies hit by the flame take continuous damage and are inflicted with burn. Now, as cool as Burn Taste is, it is not the best ability and it is definitely not used for bossing. This can be very good for clearing ads, but this build is not building into Burn Taste. As I stated earlier, this build is mainly focusing on truly deadly cuisine, which is the Transcendent mod for Blair. However, if you do have a large mob in front of you, you are able to use Burn Taste because it will clear them out pretty efficiently. Just make sure that you're not using this on bosses because you cannot cancel the flamethrower animation. Once you start, you do have to finish it based on your duration. So when you use Burn Taste, you do lose your mobility and you have to sit there for the entirety of the animation. So make sure that when you use Burn Taste, you're using it at a point where you really want to clear out a bunch of ads. The cooldown on Burn Taste for this build is 20.5 seconds, the MP cost is 40.2. The continuous damage of Flamethrower or Burn Taste is your skill power times 132.6% skill power modifier. The damage interval is every 0.3 seconds, so you get 3 ticks of damage every second. The duration is 4.5 seconds and the range is 3 meters on my build, but can be increased to 6 meters at a 200% max expandable range. The burn damage stays consistent throughout all of the burn you can apply with Blair, being a continuous damage of skill power times an 8.2% modifier, 1 second interval, and a duration of 5 seconds. And moving on to Blair's fourth ability and his bread and butter for this build, the Truly Deadly Cuisine. Truly Deadly Cuisine fires a giant fireball forward. On explosion, the giant fireball inflicts burst damage and burn on nearby enemies. Now again, the burn damage is negligible, so we're really only worrying about the burst damage here. With using the Truly Deadly Cuisine Transcendent mod, you do lose the flame zones that get created, but it's not that big of a deal. Now moving on to the basic info for Truly Deadly Cuisine, we have a 47.8 second cooldown with this build and a 69 MP cost, so it is quite expensive. The giant fireball burst damage is going to be your skill power times a 6,934.4% skill power modifier. This is where a majority of his damage comes from. The skill power modifier is insanely high on this, so the burst damage you get is very, very nice. The explosion damage radius is 4 meters, can be increased to 8 meters if you opt to build for range, but would not recommend it. And once again, the burn is here. The continuous damage is your skill power times 8.2% modifier for a damage interval of 1 second and a duration of 5 seconds. Again, it stays consistent throughout all of the burn you can apply with Blair. Now that we've gone over Blair's abilities, and if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to use the comment section below. I will be responding to all the comments that I can. I know that sometimes this stuff can be confusing, so I am here to help you guys if you need any help. I also stream live here on YouTube. If you want to come and ask any live questions, I'll probably be streaming when you're watching this video. So if you do have any questions and you don't want to wait for me to respond to your comment, go ahead and check if I'm live and maybe you can ask me there. Now to quickly do a rundown of the gameplay loop for Blair, if you go back over to his passive, you see that you get a skill critical hit damage increase of 10% on enemies that are burning. Now this 10% is not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things because of the amount of damage that you're doing regardless. So burning your enemies is not the end all be all. You do not have to inflict burn on your enemies, but it is nice to get the 10% if you're able to do it efficiently. Now what is very important is your skill critical hit rate increase for flame zones. So the gameplay loop for Blair is to have 3 flame zones on the ground at all times. The reason you want 3 flame zones on the ground at all times is because you get that 14% skill critical hit rate increase. Now with the build I'm showcasing in this video, you can easily get your skill critical hit rate upwards of 75%, and that is more than enough to crit almost every time you use your ability. However, with the endgame build I will be showing in another video, you can actually get this to 100% and you will be critting every single time you use your ability no matter what. However, the investment is a little bit larger, so it's not as beginner friendly and it's not as easy to obtain early game. So this build is much more manageable if you just want to pick up Blair and you don't want to invest a bunch of time and resources into just building him. So the most important thing with Blair is to keep those 3 flame zones on the ground anytime you use your Truly Deadly Cuisine. Keeping these flame zones on the ground while you use your Truly Deadly Cuisine will almost always grant you a crit, and this crit is going to give you a significant increase to your damage. The damage of Truly Deadly Cuisine is very underwhelming if it doesn't crit, so you want to make sure that you have 3 flame zones on the ground when you're casting the ability. Now you can get away with having just 2 on the ground and it will crit a good portion of the time. But again, if this ability doesn't crit, your damage is going to be significantly lower than it would be if it does crit. So keep in mind that when casting Truly Deadly Cuisine, your 4, you want to try to make sure that you have flame zones on the ground. Now you can see how many flame zones you have on the ground if you're losing track of time. If you look at the bottom right next to his fourth ability, it'll tell you how many you have out at the moment. That way, if you lost track of them or you don't know how long you've had them out, it will tell you exactly how many you have when you have them. This makes it a lot easier to keep track of how many flame zones you currently have out. So as I touched on before, Extinguish is used to recover your MP. And the way you do this is by pulling back the 3 flame zones that you have created, or however many you have created at the time, getting 19 MP per flame zone. So because we know that you use your flame zones to increase your skill critical hit rate, once you use your 4th ability after creating 3 flame zones, and your 4th ability hits, you can actually use Extinguish to pull back the 3 flame zones you just created, and give yourself back that 57 MP. Now this helps a lot if you intend on using your flamethrower to clear out a mob of ads, or if you just want to maintain your MP and you're not going to be killing a lot of ads that are going to drop you MP drops. Blair does use quite a bit of MP, so using Extinguish regularly is something that you should pay attention to and try to use it as often as you can. Now you do have a long cooldown on your truly deadly cuisine, so it's not like you're going to be able to spam it with this build. So pay attention to the flame zones that you have created after using Truly Deadly Cuisine, because other than using them to boost the skill critical hit rate of Truly Deadly Cuisine, we're really not using our flame zones for anything other than that. So you don't need your flame zones out on the ground when you're not using Truly Deadly Cuisine, so just pull them back and save yourself a little bit of MP, make it a little easier on yourself. Now with that being said, if you do want to use your flame zones or your blaze up to just throw at doors where enemies are spawning, or just keep them on the ground so ads that are running around get burned by them, you can do that. Just keep in mind with this build, the area is very small because we're not building into range, and the damage isn't the best, but you still can use it to kill mobs of ads. Now we've gone over Blair and all of his abilities, his passive, and what his gameplay loop looks like. We're going to move on to the modules. So a very important module for this build is the Transcendent mod Truly Deadly Cuisine. Significantly increases the damage of Giant Fireball. When Giant Fireball explodes, small fireballs and flame zones do not spawn. So you lose the extra creation of flame zones for the extra damage, and the damage you get is a significant boost to your damage. The damage increase is well worth losing the extra flame zones you create. So Truly Deadly Cuisine is a must for this build. And Truly Deadly Cuisine Transcendent mod can be obtained by doing the old mystery mission in the Agios region. It's an operation that you have to do, and you can get this by completing the mission from Final Boss. Now moving on to his next module, we have Focus on Fire. The reason we go with Focus on Fire is not only for the 6.1% skill cooldown, but also because you get fire skill power plus 77.2%. Now for Blair, because we're using his 4, and that's our main source of damage, the skill power modifier, which is the percentage after the skill power X, is so high that building for skill power modifier is not going to be effective for us because our modifier is already so high. So adding 30% to 6,934.4%, or even 70% to 6,934.4% is going to give you a very, very small damage increase and is a waste of your mod. However, building into any mod that says skill power percent, not modifier, is going to increase the base skill power you have, which in turn will give you a bigger number to multiply into the skill power modifier. So this is why we went with Focus on Fire, again, not only for the cooldown, but for the raw fire skill power damage increase. Then we go with Increased HP. Now increased HP is almost a must in every Descendant in my opinion. Just slotting in increased HP alone gives you a significant boost to your survivability. So again, I slot this in almost every single Descendant I build, and I think that you should also try to slot this in. HP along with defense increase your survivability tenfold, and both are very crucial to almost every single build in the first Descendant. Then we have Emergency Measures. Emergency Measures gives a skill critical hit rate of 64.6% and a skill critical hit damage of 27.7%. Now because we want Blair's ability to crit every single time, you're going to be dumping into crit. You're going to be dumping as much resources as you can into his skill critical hit rate and skill critical hit damage. The more skill critical hit rate you have, the more often you crit, and the more damage you have, the harder the crit hits. Then we have Skill Concentration. Again, this just boosts your skill critical hit damage. The more damage we have, the bigger the number. Then we move on to Frontlines. Frontlines gives you a skill critical hit damage and a skill critical hit rate. It's basically the same thing as Emergency Measures, it just switches the skill critical hit rate and the skill critical hit damage. So you get 64.6% skill critical hit damage and 27.7% skill critical hit rate. These two mods combined give you a significant boost to skill critical hit rate and damage, and these are two great mods to go on any Descendant you're building for pure crit. Then we have Nimble Fingers. Nimble Fingers gives you a 25.6% cooldown. This is nice because again, you want to use your ability as much as you possibly can, and it already has a long cooldown. So the 25.6% cooldown is very nice to have, so you can use your ability a little bit more. Now, unlike the endgame build that I have coming out in another video, this build does not invest heavily into cooldown. but there is a way to get your cooldown very short. However, you do have to sacrifice a few things, or you have to invest a lot into Blair. Now, because this is a beginner-friendly guide, I'm assuming that you guys don't have the resources to invest into Blair. So Nimble Fingers is going to be your best bet to just get a nice 25% cooldown and help you use those abilities just a little bit more. Now, the reason I opt for Nimble Fingers and not Multi-Talented, which I'm sure some of you are wondering, is because you get 5% less cooldown, and Nimble Fingers is applied to a lot of builds in the First Descendant, whereas Multi-Talented is not always applied to a build. So leveling up a Multi-Talented versus leveling up a Nimble Fingers, it's better to go with the latter because you do use Nimble Fingers on a lot of builds, whereas again, Multi-Talented is situational. And then for the last mod that I slot is a unupgraded Spear and Shield. Now there's a couple reasons we opt to slot in an unupgraded Spear and Shield. The first one being you get a 8.1% skill power increase no matter what level or what rank you have your Spear and Shield mod. The only thing that gets increased is the defense. Now the defense is nice, and if you could fit in a maxed out Spear and Shield, obviously that's preferred. Again, we're trying to be as efficient as we can because I know that it does take a lot of time and resources to build a Descendant up. So going for the base Spear and Shield still gives you the 8.1% skill power with a little 22% defense, which is better than nothing. And the second reason is if we go here and we go to Rutile, you look, there's not many mods that you would want to slot in here that's better than the 8.1% increase from Spear and Shield unupgraded, because we're looking at little space here. And Blair comes with a Rutile socket base in the Descendant, so you don't have a choice whether you have a Rutile in there or not. So Spear and Shield is easily going to be your best mod to slot into the Rutile socket unupgraded. So with this being a beginner build, these mods are all easily accessible. You can get these very easily. The hardest one probably being Truly Deadly Cuisine and long distance maneuvering. But as you're going through this build, you might already have every single mod here. If you needed to modify the way the mods are because you just don't have enough space, you could drop skill concentration a bit because you'll just be reducing the damage. You want to keep your skill critical hit rate as high as you can because critting is significantly better than not critting with Truly Deadly Cuisine. But if you do want to drop the damage a bit, if you want to keep this halfway upgraded, you don't have enough space, you can go for that. You're just going to miss out on some damage, obviously. But it's better to drop the skill critical hit damage than to drop anything regarding skill critical hit rate. Now we're going to move over into game and I'm going to show you how his abilities affect his skill critical hit chance and his skill critical hit damage. And there is a way to see exactly what you can get your skill critical hit rate to depending on how much you have your mods upgraded. So I'm going to show you that right now. So moving into the range here, if you hit I on your keyboard or open up your inventory with a controller, for keyboard you press W or go to info, you see here that our skill critical hit rate is at 44.8% base with this build. That's not bad for a base build. Now because the way Blair's passive works, remember, giving you that 14% skill critical hit rate when you have 3 flame zones out, we back out here, we put down 1 flame zone, we go back to info, you see we're now at 55.1. Put 2 flame zones, we go to 63.9, and putting 3 flame zones, we're going to wait here for a second, put down 2. Is our 3 flame zones, we have 74.936, so basically 75% skill critical hit rate. Having 75% skill critical hit rate is more than enough to crit majority of the time when you use your Truly Deadly Cuisine. Again, this can be increased much higher if you have more to invest, and that will be seen later in a end-game build. But for the beginner build, 75% is a nice number to have, and I will showcase how often you crit using this build right now. And then you see we have 4.42 for our skill critical hit damage multiplier. So now let's show you what it looks like when you use the ability. We're going to spawn a target here. Put him on level 100 so he has the resistances, so you can see the damage. It's on because it's bugged. Spawn the Vulgus. So we're going to put down our 3 flame zones, and we're not going to burn him so that way you see the base damage if you don't burn, because honestly burning your enemies with your flame zones can be quite tedious. We're going to put down 3 flame zones, and if you look in the bottom right, we have 3. We're going to use Truly Deadly Cuisine. We hit for 7.2 million. Now we're going to use our Extinguish to pull back our 3 flame zones, and if you look at our MP at the bottom, we got all the way back to half MP. Now it's not anything crazy, but it's better than nothing. Now keep in mind that we had the 75% skill critical hit rate and it's still crit. As I said, majority of the time you're going to be critting. It's very rare to not crit, and if you don't, you're very unlucky. Now I won't go and say that it doesn't hit for non-crits. I've had it happen to me many times, but I also use the ability a lot and play a lot. So over the time that I have played in Blair and the amount of times I've used the ability, it crits a significant amount more than it doesn't. So you're not really going to have to worry about your ability not critting with 75% crit chance. Now, as I said, you can throw Truly Deadly Cuisine just base. You don't have to have flame zones, but it's not recommended because your skill critical hit chance is very low. If we just throw a Truly Deadly Cuisine, I doubt it's going to crit. See, so it didn't crit and the damage was awful. So you can see how big of a difference it makes to get that crit. Now, if we were to just put down one flame zone, again, it's better than not putting down any, but don't expect the crit. It is a very low chance to crit. However, it's still possible. So there we go. So we did crit with just one, but keep in mind that if you do only have one down, your crit chance is going to be very low compared to having three. As you can see, we only have a 55% chance. That should mean that every 2 truly deadly cuisines you throw, one of them should crit. However, first descendant crit rates or crit chance, the percentages can seem a little wonky. So we try it again here. See if we can get a back-to-back crit. Back-to-back crits, and we're only using one flame zone. So again, this is what you're going to do if you are having trouble with MP. If you do get your truly deadly cuisine back and you just don't have MP, always try to get at least one flame zone down so you do get to at least a 55% crit rate. Now, as a quick little tip, if you're moving into a void intercept boss battle, while you're running up to the boss, you're waiting for him to spawn. Keep in mind, don't do this if it's longer than 12 seconds before he spawns, but wait till you see him falling out of the sky. If you put your flame zones down or your blaze up, your MP does recover until you get into the battle. So it's recovering much faster until you actually start fighting the boss. So putting it down a little early does help with that MP as well, because it's going to be regenerating a little bit faster. So if you see here, my MP is regenerating pretty fast. If I get into battle, the regen stops. So again, putting these down before the boss comes out does help with a little bit of that MP regen. As I said, Blair does have an issue with MP. So until you have the space to invest into MP recovery, max MP, or skill cost reduction, you're going to have to take as much MP as you can possibly get wherever you can get it. Now that we've gone over Blair and all of his interactions, how his ability works, what his gameplay loop is like, and how I would mod him out for the early game, we're going to move on to the weapons and the external components along with the reactor. Those are also very important for this build that I have on Blair. So let's go ahead and move to them right now. If we start here looking at the weapons, I have the Enduring Legacy. Now, this is not built out because I just got it. As you can see, it's only level 32, and here's the mods I have on it. I don't have space, I don't have a format, I don't have a potato in it or an energy activator or frame term. However, this thing is an absolute beast, and once I do get to mod it out, I know that this is going to be a really, really good weapon. Now, with this weapon being a beast by itself, you actually can increase its damage using Blair because you can apply burn to your enemies. And if we go ahead and look at the intrinsic ability or the unique ability, if we go all the way to the bottom here, on hitting an enemy inflicted with burn, you get firearm attack 7%. That's base. Now I can increase this by putting more Enduring Legacies into this one, but I don't have more Enduring Legacies to put into this one just yet. So for now, it stays at a firearm attack of 7%, which is better than nothing because we will be applying burn to the enemy when we use Truly Deadly Cuisine. Moving on to our second weapon that we use, we have the Eternal Willpower. Now, the Eternal Willpower is an absolute beast of a weapon, but this is only used to reach our optimization condition. We want to meet the optimization condition because we want that 140% skill power as opposed to the 100% for missing the optimization condition. So while the Eternal Willpower is an absolute beast by itself, this is just used for the optimization condition, and it's good for clearing out ads and taking care of any of the little enemies you have around you. And then for our final weapon, we have the Afterglow Sword. Now, this is an insane damage dealer. Now, the Afterglow Sword has insane damage potential. I don't have my modded out to how I want to have it, and I don't have the rolls that I would ideally want on it. But even with that being said, the amount of damage you can output with this gun is insane. Now, it doesn't have any interactions with Blair specifically, unless we talk about his weapon build, which will be in the end-game guide. But this weapon has insane DPS. So if we look at the mods here, this is how I'd mod it. In my case, because of the capacity that I have, I go for Expand Weapon Charge to get the 2 extra shots. And we'll go over how I get the 2 extra shots by just having a level 2 Expand Weapon Charge. That's going to be tied to the external components and the bonuses they give. But the most important mod that I have on this Afterglow Sword is going to be Strengthened First Shot, which gives you 200% firearm attack after reloading. So when you load into a Void Intercept battle, as soon as the barrier drops, reload the Afterglow Sword. It'll start that 10-second cooldown for the 200% damage on the first shot. You can shoot your shot, reload, the cooldown will be reset by then, get 2 200% damage shots, and the damage this thing can output is absolutely crazy. Again, it has no intrinsic interactions with Blair for this build, but just alone, this weapon's a beast. Now, moving on from the weapons, if you have any questions, again, use the comment section, ask me anything you like. I answer everything that you guys ask. Along with that, if you have any tips or if you have any tweaks that you would do to this build, feel free to leave in the comment section as well. I love constructive criticism. I love to learn. So I love hearing what you guys have to say about the build and what you would change to make it better or what you would change for convenience wise. Now, moving on to the reactor, we touched on it a little bit. It's a burning phase reactor. Burning phase reactors give you a fire skill power boost ratio and a dimension skill power boost ratio. Now, obviously we want the fire skill power boost ratio because Blair's main attribute is fire. And the reason we go for the dimension skill power boost ratio is because Truly Deadly Cuisine, along with Blaze Up, are dimension skills. So you want that boost ratio to be applied to his truly deadly cuisine. And for the substats here, this is very important when you're going for a bossing build. You want skill critical hit rate and skill critical hit damage. This makes Blair's truly deadly cuisine crit more often and a lot harder. So getting a purple or a gold skill critical hit rate and skill critical hit damage is very important. Now, if you don't have it, again, it's not the end of the world, but just expect less crits and less damage from your crits. Now, moving into our reactors, if you're building for something that's more everyday content and you're not throwing fireballs trying to crit on void intercept bosses, you could opt for a cooldown like I have here. I have a skill cost and a skill cooldown for my substats. I would prefer they be better, but this works for now. Obviously, as I said before, you want the burning phase reactor. So you want the dimension to get that extra damage from your truly deadly cuisine and your blaze up. Also, make sure that you're always meeting the optimization condition. Now, you could opt for something with an Afterglow mounting or an Enduring Legacy mounting if you're going to copy my weapons. Just keep in mind that you do have to have the weapon equipped if you want the 160% skill power increase. I find it to be quite tedious, so I usually opt to go for the purple reactors because I don't want to have that weapon in my hand or think about having that weapon in my hand all the time. However, with this build, since the Afterglow Sword is a main part of your damage, you can go for an Afterglow Sword mounting. It's not bad. I have a couple here. We have the Afterglow Sword mounting with the skill critical hit damage and effect range. I would like this to obviously have the skill critical hit rate. This would be really good, but it's also attacking out of dimension, so it does decrease the damage of my truly deadly cuisine by quite a bit. I don't have a god rolled ultimate reactor, but again, for the most part, I tend to go for the purple reactors because I just don't want to have to worry about having my weapon in my hand when I'm using my abilities. Now, moving on from the reactors, we have our external component. Now, the best external component set to have for Blair that's easy to obtain in the early game is going to be the Slayer set. The Slayer set gives you general rounds capacity, which is not what we're using this for. Along with general rounds capacity, we have rounds per magazine at +9. Now, this is what gives me that 8th shot rather than the 7, along with the way I have my Afterglow Sword rolled. This gives me that 1 extra shot in my magazine. The skill cost is +15%, which is not so good for us because I did say that Blair has MP problems, but the trade-off for that is that you get 26.1% skill power. The 26.1% skill power is a raw skill power and not a modifier. The truly deadly cuisine does get a nice boost to its damage when using this. However, if you do not want to do the skill cost, you cannot maintain the MP, or you don't have the Slayer set. Another good set is going to be the Annihilation set. The Annihilation set gives you a 5.7% skill duration, and it gives you firearm attack increase proportionally to the ratio of max HP to HP lost. So the more HP you lost, the more firearm attack you get. This is helpful because you are going to be using your weapons in between the rotation of waiting for your truly deadly cuisine to come off cooldown. So having that extra firearm attack can be nice to just help pump more damage into the boss. So those are the two external component sets that I would recommend. And again, they're pretty easy to obtain early game or early on into the game, so this shouldn't be too much of a grind. The Annihilation set's very easy to get because the Devourer is kind of weak, so you can farm them very efficiently, very fast. Now moving on to the stats that I have for my external components. So since I'm using the Slayer set, I am limited into how I would build this. Now the Annihilation set is a little better for the stats that you can get on it, because if you look at the Annihilation set, you see here I have defense with resistances. This one I have defense with max HP. And max HP is really good to roll on your external components because although it says I get 841 HP, I'm not actually getting 841 HP. Now I also have a max HP on my Slayer set for the auxiliary power. So again, really quickly, I want to elaborate on the 876 max HP. Now if we back out here real quick and we look at my HP, I have 8077 HP. Now if we hover over our external component, it says that we get 876. But if you do the math and you do 8077 minus 876, you get 7201. Now I'm going to take this off. And you'll see here that the number does not match up. This is actually a 2000 health difference, roughly. So you're really getting 2876 HP. Now, I don't know the reasoning for this, and I don't know if anybody else knows the reasoning for this, but the HP doesn't seem to be an additive. It seems to be a multiplier of some sort. So rolling HP on your external components is very nice. This does not apply for shield. So for shield, as you see here, I have 1144. And if I go and I grab a max shield here, so with this not applying to max shield, as you see, I get 275 here for shield. I'm going to put on the max shield. And again, we had 1144. So if we do 1144 and we add 275 to it, we should be getting 1,419. If I back out, we do get 1,419. So the shield applies correctly in terms of addition. And again, I could be missing something or maybe not understanding how it works. So if anybody knows, feel free to leave that in the comment section so we can learn together. But as of right now, building into HP for the external components is going to be your best bang for your buck because you're getting so much more HP than it actually says you're getting. Now, I just wanted to touch on that really quickly because I don't know why it does that, and I wanted everybody to be aware that it does do that. So maybe that'll affect your decisions when you're building your external components, or when you're farming your external components, I should say. Now moving back to the actual external component I use. For the auxiliary power, I go for a defense because defense also applies the same way as health. It's not an additive, it's a multiplicative of some sort. Plus the max HP and the DBNO. DBNO stands for dead but not out, or down but not out. This is when you're down, I just get an increase to the amount of time I can be down before I actually bleed out. Moving on to the Slayer Sensor. Slayer Sensor, I have a max shield because this comes with max shield. Now the substats for the Slayer Sensor is not as good as I would like. I haven't got one exactly that I want. I still do want to farm for a better one. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get any good ones so far, and I have gotten a lot of them. So for right now, I have a max shield with drop rate increase modifier and character XP gain modifier. And then for the Slayer Memory, I have another max shield because that's what it comes with. Then I have a gold drop rate increase modifier with an Sieve search radius. As I said, these could be better. I'm using this for the bonus that gets applied when you use 4, but there is other ones that you could use that are better, and there is better rolls you can get on these. So if you want to farm the Pyromaniac, then you can do that and try to get better drops than I have. And moving on finally to the Slayer Processor, I have a max HP with a max shield and a shield recovery modifier. This one's actually quite good. I do like this one. Build into your external components as you'd like. You don't have to get the 26.1% skill power. Just know that your damage will be a little bit decreased, but it's not going to be groundbreaking. So it's up to you what set you decide to go for and what you decide to use for your external components. Now, with everything being said and done, if there's anything that you guys feel that I've missed, or there's anything you feel that I could tweak to make this better, feel free to leave that in the comment section. Keep in mind that this is a beginner-friendly build. I know that there's ways that I can optimize Blair much more, and I do have 2 other builds coming out. They're going to be in the same video. I'm not going to break them into 2 videos, but a weapons build and a end game ability spam build. Those are going to be coming out a day or 2 from here. So if you are heavily invested into Blair and you're looking for an end game build for him, I have that coming out for you guys, so keep your eyes open for that. If you are interested in any of the nerd stuff, any of the testing, the numbers, this is streamed live right here on YouTube, and I may be live when you're watching this video. So if you want to stop by and ask a question, leave a comment, or if you don't want to wait for me to respond to your comment and you just want to get a live answer, I'll be there, and you guys are welcome to join, hang out with us, and ask any questions or say anything that you'd like. As a small little PSA, we are now approved for the YouTube Partner Program, and I appreciate every single one of you. We're also almost at 2,000 subscribers. The growth has been insane. I did not expect this when I started doing the First Descendant content, and I'm very appreciative to every single one of you guys. It really does mean the world to me, and I can't wait to create more content for you guys. So with that being said, if you have any tips or anything to improve my content or anything that you would suggest, leave a comment and let me know. I love criticism, I love learning, and I want to improve for you guys so that way the content is much more enjoyable. I won't keep you guys any longer. Thank you so much for watching the video. You're much appreciated and much love to everyone. I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.